number of us visited the southern border last year. We heard from your officers about the challenges that drones were posing. And one question I have is, I understand they're being used primarily by the cartels for surveillance, to see where your officers are so that they can, more effectively traffic people, narcotics, firearms, et cetera, across the border. Do you see any evidence of the cartels using drones to actually move some of that contraband? Like, I'm thinking specifically of fentanyl. Are they using UASs to actually move fentanyl across the border?
We have yet to see fentanyl being moved via UAS. We have seen other narcotics, albeit in small quantities. From a cost model, it's not as effective for cartels because the payload capacity is so small, they have to make multiple trips. We have seen cocaine, we have seen heroin, we have seen methamphetamine, we've seen weapons. So there is a threat of moving contraband across our borders.
So the numbers, of course, are staggering. I think at one point in your written testimony, you alluded to periods of as many as 1,000 detections a week. But the number of mitigations at the southern border was 86 in fiscal year 23 and 60 in fiscal 24. So why so few as a percentage of the whole? What are the barriers that you're facing?
Well, again, many of these detections occur in foreign airspace, thereby we cannot mitigate. Actually, a very small percentage actually incur into the United States. So, for example, in the southwest border, only 5% of that large number actually affected an incursion. Of that, we have very strict criteria, and they met the criteria. So the 60 that we mitigated in FY24 actually met the criteria for mitigation.
So I'm going to ask about both the 5% and the 95% then. So in the 5% that do come into our airspace, is the criteria too narrow, to bring them down? Why again, so few?
Well, again, one of the things that's notable here is that those are not 2,500 unique identifiers. You have repeat offenders. So we take down or mitigate one drone. Of that large number, that could be responsible for hundreds of those detections.
So these are events, not necessarily individual drones, these statistics.
That's correct.
Okay. So on the 95%, or really I guess 100%, even if you don't have the authority to bring them down, those that are over foreign airspace, do you still have the ability, the technological ability to track where the operators are and to alert the Mexican or Canadian authorities as to where the operators are? And can you explain what that process is like?
Absolutely. And we do communicate directly with our foreign partners, and our communication is healthy, our sharing of information is healthy. And so what you just described is exactly what we do.
And is it working? Does it happen? I mean, when you notify Mexican authorities, for example, that, hey, we've got a drone and we know where the operator is, I mean, are they pursuing the operators? Do you have success stories? Again, are there gaps that need to be filled in that process? Can you elaborate?
Well, again, we have to rely on so in the case of government of Mexico, we have to rely on our Mexican partners to respond. A lot of times these are in areas that are not highly populated. They're very difficult to get to. They're also controlled by cartels. So by the time law enforcement responds, it's very challenging for them. It's not from lack of effort or lack of communication. It's just a very difficult environment.
Yeah. With the minute that I have left, I'll shift to Mr. Weekman. On the issue of special events, of SEER events, can you just elaborate a little bit more about why it is so important that the state and locals have expanded authorities, and what should the appropriate guardrails be, for those expanded authorities?
Yes. Each year, the FBI can cover a number of special events, and DHS covers some as well. So we're talking about big events like the Super Bowl, the World Series, the Indianapolis 500, that sort of thing. But obviously, those are not the only events that could be subject to an attack or a drone threat. You have many other football games, baseball games, soccer games, the World Cup. And if you add them all up, just focused on sporting events, even forgetting about New York Times, New Year's celebration, there's all manner of events. So we can only cover a tiny fraction of those in any given year. And so if Congress gives the authority to state and locals to engage in the same activity, that vastly expands the scope of what counter-drone protection
I'll just note
provided.
for the record, thank you. I understand the need to expand that authority for the state and locals for these special events. I will just highlight, though, I think training is going to be very important in this because there are plenty of people who fly drones at, high school football games and stuff for legitimate reasons. And we'll just need to make sure that the state and locals have the training to know how to kind of go after the bad guys without overly penalizing the good guys. But I take your broader point. And
Absolutely.
I yield back.
That's a big part of it, the training.
Gentleman's time has expired.